Hello, my reflection. I'm Camden Fells. I'm gonna put out a series of videos for everyone in an effort to promote transparency and to build relationships. I really appreciate you guys watching my material, and the purpose of these videos is for you to be able to get to know my journey a little bit more, and perhaps we can find some commonality in this story, and to just be transparent, to be open and forthright with everyone as to who I am and where I come from, and how I even arrived at this place. So I'm gonna release 6 videos on this, and it's gonna be over 6 different topics. The first one is gonna be my origin story. The second one will be over my personality. The third one will be over my strengths. The fourth one will be over my weaknesses. The fifth one will be over what I stand for, and then the sixth and last one will be over what I stand against. And so, again, this is something that I'm doing just to build rapport with you guys and to build a relationship with you. Part of what I'm doing here on YouTube is I'm wanting to develop a symbiotic relationship between myself and you, my reflection, so that we can support one another. We're here to be able to emerge as this authentic being walking the earth that is achieving and creating the life that they are meant to live. And so I'm here to support you with that, and I feel like by being transparent and letting you know my journey, perhaps this will be a point of reference for you to look at your own journey and decide to make some decisions or do some further research or something like that. So that's the purpose of this video. So the first one I'll start off with, I'll just start right here and start with my origin story. And I'm going to think through this because I want these words to come through as authentically as possible. My origin, of course, I can't quite speak to before I hit the birth canal. I have my suspicions as to how that was, but let's just start with at the birth canal. I've had several conversations with my mother about my origin, and she has been very clear that I must have really wanted to be here because of the amount of effort it took to have me. In fact, when I came through the birth canal, I came through and they had to use forceps to pull me out of the womb. And so this is something that I was clearly very determined to be here. And the family that I chose, as I've studied myself on this journey now, I chose this family for this specific journey. And the journey that I engaged as a young person, say from 0 to 7, was really a journey. The way I digested this experience was a journey of some darkness and a journey of some love along the way. I grew up in the inner city of Kansas City. So I grew up on the east side of Kansas City. This is during a time, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. So this is during a time of drugs were really on the rise in the inner cities back then. So you had your crack and you had your different substances that were going through the neighborhood. And of course, by having those sorts of influences, it's going to attract a certain personality that would need substances like that. And so I witnessed a lot of pain early on. From 0 to 7, I would say what I witnessed was a lot of dysfunction, because of the neighborhood that I lived in and that community that I lived in. There was a lot of dysfunctional households. I witnessed, a lot of the just stress-driven frustrations of people, and those frustrations can sometimes boil over into rage or into anger. I've witnessed domestic violence, not in my home, but it's certainly in my community. I've witnessed these things as a young person, and I would say that that level of pain really was something that had a profound impact on me, because now that I look back on my life in those formative years, I could really feel a lot of things. I could feel a lot of the pain, the frustration, and a lot of the storyline that was fed to me through society and through school and through your church and through your parents didn't necessarily resonate with me. You know, this idea that we're in this competition to be better, and you know, because you're of this ethnicity, you know, you're African American, so you have to try twice as hard, and even if you do, you know, good luck. And it is how I took that in. Now, at the time, that may have been very good advice, but as a young person, it did not make sense to me that I would be born here on the earth just to have the cards stacked against me and to not have any choice in the matter. So this idea of choice in the matter, at a young age, started to develop as this question of, there must be choice in the matter, because I watch TV like everybody else. I mean, so back then, you know, you would be watching Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, you'd watch Entertainment Tonight and stuff like that. And you would see other African Americans that appeared to be living a very prosperous life. And of course, you know, if you're not living a prosperous life, that really appeals to you. As a young person, you don't understand the human experience. All you see is the glitz and the glamour, and you see the wealth, the imagery, let's call it imagery, that you saw on television. And even in the neighborhood, you know, the guys you know, they were making money too. It may not have been the legal way to make money, and ironically, some of those ways are now legal. But even when you saw that, it was this imagery that says, hey, you know, if you can get your hands on some money, then that'll solve all your problems. So for a big part of my life as a young person, it was apparent to me that if I don't subscribe to the idea that there is a high likelihood that I'm going to be a statistic of a man that is going to either die or go to jail, or at the very most have a child out of wedlock and not you know, really have any means. If I were to reject that argument, then that means that there must be another answer out there. And what I found over those formative years, you know, let's just say that from 0 to 7, I just went over, you know, this sort of programming that you have, that the cards are stacked against you and good luck, to where now you're moving into middle school and you start to build your personality more. And I started to come into contact with some people. And as I look back on this, it really is interesting to me how these people, even looking at them as angels or guides, came along the journey of my life to help steer me. So without being conscious of being conscious, looking back on this, you could see that up under the surface of this programming, this backdrop of this life that I was born into, that there was an invisible hand that was responding to my questions beyond this physical experience. And so a lot of these people were there to be examples for me as to what it could look like as an African American in this stage, this let's call this stage of inner city living, you know, almost like I've even heard someone call it, you know, Shakespeare's play to just there to amuse you. You know, I'm very much looking at this as a storyline, because I realize now that I am the witness of everything that has happened to me. And so through that witnessing, you can see how this really interesting storyline is playing out. And so these people would come along the way, and they would have just enough information for my mind, my young mind, to absorb that says, I'm African American. No, I'm not rich or famous, but I got a good family, and I like what I do for a living, and I'm doing stuff positive in the world. So obviously, here is evidence right here in front of you, son, that is showing you that that you can be something, you can do something. It doesn't have to necessarily be that these are your options. And so, again, unconscious of this, I was just observing, and I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so it seems like right around middle school, I discovered that I had a talent for drawing and for art. And through this art, I discovered a love for architecture. And it would always, I would notice, I think that's when I first started to realize this idea of a flow state. You know, this idea that you have this imagery in your mind, and then this imagery comes from your mind through a pen onto a piece of paper. And not only does it go onto a piece of paper, people see the beauty in it, and they can see how that could actually take another step further and become, you know, a foundation on earth and this building and everything. And that really appealed to me. So going to that imagery, prior to that imagery, I used to leave a note on my mother's pillow every night before well, not every night, but many nights before I would go to sleep, because as a young person, I would experience happenings in life that I had already experienced. Like I had already seen it before, and then it happened. And it would spook me because I didn't know what it was. Well, it turns out that they would probably call that deja vu now. Or it could be clairvoyance. It could be one of the clairs. It could be, but that was that looking back on that was my first entree into understanding that you may not be seeing everything. You know, there are other possibilities there. How is it that I already lived this so vividly, and now I'm living it in real life, and I can't quite tell the difference. So I used to leave notes about that, and so that's very interesting. So I've always been a really internal person. So that architecture was just the next step of it. I would have these different buildings and imagery and this expression in my mind, and I would take it and I would put it on the paper, and it would create this flow that I was in. And it really was a flow where I could sit down and I could start drawing, and it'd be 1 p.m. and then before I knew it, it'd be 7 p.m. and I hadn't even left the desk. So it was this moment where I was experiencing this creative force and this level of peace and knowing that didn't exist if I were to walk outside that door and go outside and play or whatever it was. You know, for the most part, people weren't operating in that space, is the point I'm trying to get across. So with that creative ability, over time, it feels like I just developed that creative ability. And that creative ability went to creating architecture, to how do you create a life? And as a young person, I knew that I had enough examples out there to know what I did not want. And I knew and I knew that I did want something called success. I used to just say, I just want to be successful. If I'm successful, then I'm good. You know, I could do whatever I want to do. And I was partly right. But it was, if you don't have a reference point for success, then that's what makes the journey really interesting, because you got to have a reference point. And so since I didn't have a reference point of the success that I was looking for, that I saw internally, I had to just stay internal. And a lot of people when I was younger used to say, well, Cameron, you're just a dreamer. You got to get your head out of the clouds. You know, you got to come down here in reality with the rest of us. You're delusional. What is wrong with you? Know, why are you? But from where I stand right now, and I want to say to everyone, you're only delusional if you don't realize it. And so it's interesting when you're that bright light, even as a young person, you're reflecting. You're going to reflect darkness. That shadow is going to reflect. So when you're bright light, people are going to say, turn that light down. And you got to tell them, no, just put on some sunglasses, because I'm on to something here. And so this creative ability went from architecture to creating success to creating a life. And through that journey, as I removed myself from that backdrop of inner city and I started to create more of a life for myself, I started to be able to see that over time you would get so much success, and then you would hit a wall. Then you would get a little bit more success and you would hit a wall. Well, those walls are blockages. And what are those blockages? Those blockages are programming, belief systems, these things inside of you that are really directing your life. I mean, even neuroscientists are saying, you show me a kid to age 7 and what he experienced, and I'll show you the rest of his life. So if you want to bypass that programming, then that's where this work really comes in, where you start to dig deeper and you're asking yourself, what is this flow state that I was in when I was drawing buildings? And is it just the buildings that I can create on this paper, or can I take that same point of view and apply it to my life? Well, yes, you can. You just have to practice it. So I have this piece of paper, and I kind of wrote, I don't know if you guys can see that. I hope this plays out okay. But this is how I see myself as a human being, where you have this field, and I'm calling it a field of love and positivity. I feel like we're all come here as pure positive energy. We all come here as pure love. That's why God is love. So you have to start to play with that and ask yourself, okay, your last name is Smith. So your mother's name was Smith, and so now your name is Smith. So does that make you a Smith? Okay, so the origin of you is this creator, this source, or God, or however you want to say that. So what does that make you? Well, certainly, in my opinion, makes you a creator, makes you a God, makes you a point of reference, makes you a creative force. And so that creative force is the force of love. Everything beyond that is a departure from that. It's a blockage that's not allowing that to come through. So let's call this field, this circle, which I'm saying is you, and let's just call it the field of love and positivity. Let's just call it that. And we can call it whatever we want. We can call it anything, but just point of reference, we're going to call it that. And then, in this field, these lines represent pathways. So this may be a pathway of love. This may be a pathway to money. This may be a pathway to success. This may be a pathway to being a great athlete. And these pathways, when you come here, are very free-flowing pathways. But then you get along the way, and then, they tell you that you're horrible managing money. And so in that pathway, you have a blockage. That's what that little dot is. You have a blockage there. So you'll only get so far, and you only make so much money until you bump up against that limitation. So now it's, well, how do I overcome the limitation? Well, there really is no overcoming the limitation. It's just realizing that it's simply programming, and that now you can work with that to massage and lessen that blockage until you just go straight through it. So these dots represent blockages on these pathways. We all have different blockages. We all have different levels of blockages, different intensities of blockages, and everything like that. But the point is that in order to create the life that you want, you have to be willing to, one, create a life that is going to prompt you to bump up against these blockages, and two, to be able to have the courage to do the work to develop yourself past the blockage. And the development is understanding that it's simply a story that was given to you. You weren't born with this story. This is a story that was given to you by society, by your parents. It was given to you by observing certain situations and coming to conclusions. It was given to you because you were in survival or whatever the case may have been. Well, now you're in thriving. That's why you're watching this video right now. You're wondering to yourself, you're saying, well, yeah, I know that there's something more here. I know that because I've done some amazing things in my life. I know there's something more here. It's just realizing that all of this was just given to you, and just like a jacket, you can take it off and you can just keep on walking forward. That's what those blockages are. So what we're here to do is and what I'm learning here through my origin story is that we're here to remember this cohesive, coherent space of consciousness that is you. to bring those elements back together, to pull those chords back in of that pain and that story and that time where you didn't quite make it, to pull those stories back in and realize that they were simply things that were given to you, and give them back to those people. So from an origin point of view, that's really how I see things. There were a couple of big moments in my life that helped me realize that I was really on to something, going back to this idea of creating from the architecture and then parlaying that into creating this life, and then even creating this video right now that we're going to watch back together. There was a time where one of my first lessons in focus was when I was in junior high school, and I'll leave you with this. I played baseball, and I was not a very good baseball player. My buddies were good, and there were plenty of great baseball players, but I grew up playing baseball in the summertime, with the Boys and Girls Club and that kind of thing. And so I just, for some reason, really wanted to get good at baseball, partly because I wanted to play. I used to just ride the bench, and I wanted to get out there and play too. And not only did I want to play, I wanted to play varsity. So I've always shot for the moon. I've always been a very ambitious person. So after the sophomore season, I decided that the junior season I was going to play varsity. I was JV sophomore season, and I didn't even play. So I was, in my mind, was gonna go and play varsity. I was going to actually play varsity. So I went to the batting cage. I asked my mother every day after in the summertime, I would go to the batting cage every single day. So every day I would go to the batting cage for a couple hours, and she would sit there and read her, mother would sit there and read her book, and I would go to that batting cage. And in the beginning, I could not hit the ball. I was ripping my hands up. I had blisters and torn skin on my hands and everything. But by the end of the summer, every ball that I was in the fast pitch by the end of the summer, and boom, I'm hitting each and every pitch. So I kept that going until training camp started for junior year, which would have probably been around March or April. So we're talking many months of just going to the batting cage. And that first batting practice with the baseball team, when we got outside and played, which would have been around April or May of that following year, the first pitch, I hit it over the fence. The first pitch. And the coach was like, holy shit, what the... Camden, son, what in the hell? It was crazy. And then the next one, wow, just right over the fence, boom. And then I'm just hitting like an all-star. And the moral of the story is I still didn't make varsity, but it was very impressive how much I developed. But what it taught me was focus. It taught me was focus, and focus on what's important to you. How many of us out there are just focused on what's going on the news? What's going on with your auntie? What's going on with your friend across the street? What's going on with social media? It has nothing to do with you. Nothing. Because we're all living an individual experience. And so what I learned there was, if you can just focus and you can find something that you're really passionate about, and you can let that desire bubble over, and you can let that desire develop a path for you, and you focus on that desire, you will realize that desire. That was my first lesson in that. And so even though I didn't make varsity, I proved to myself that I had the ability to focus in an environment where it was so many things pulling at you. And it was something positive. And I said, well, if I can focus on this, well, what else can I focus on and make happen? Okay? And I didn't know about allowing how, again, back then I wasn't a conscious person. I was just a very driven person. But you can take those same fundamentals and you can apply it to this inner work, and you can use this inner work as leverage. I was playing with one hand to arms, two arms tied behind my back then, whereas now, we're running full speed ahead, like an Olympic track runner. So it's that you letting that desire drive you to a pathway to realize what it is you want to realize. So even if that's love, even if that's clarity, even if that's abundance, even if that's bliss, even if that's contentment, the desire for it is what drives this. And focusing on the desire and not everything outside of you that is going against the desire or doesn't believe in the desire. Only thing that matters is where you're pointing yourself internally. Are you pointing yourself towards you can do it, or pointing yourself towards you can't do it? That is, it's so simple. And I learned that early on. So I really hope that that helps. And so what I would challenge you all to do is comment down below. You know, talk to me about your story. Does this resonate? I mean, we all have an origin story. We all have a place where we started on this journey. Are you looking at your story as a part of a beautiful tapestry that's playing out? Or are you looking at your story from a victim point of view and saying, dang, but if that wouldn't have happened, then, you know, I would be better off, or, you know. And I know that everyone's story is different and there's different levels of intensity, but suffering is suffering. And we're here to promote letting go of the suffering. Life absent of suffering is authentic life. That's what we're here to do. We're here to live an authentic experience. So really ask yourself, are you looking at your story from the point of view as, wow, yeah, I did that, and look, I'm here now? Or are you looking at it from a point of view like, dang, and if they wouldn't have done that to me, then I wouldn't be here right now? Let's switch it up. That's really here. I'm wanting to be transparent with you, and I know that I've glazed over a bunch of stuff, obviously, but those are a few key points of my origin and kind of what my makeup is, and a lot of those memories I still use to this day. And now we're taking it to the next octave, and I'm hoping that my story and who I am and my appearance and my energy and everything that I represent will allow someone, one of these reflections on the other side of this camera, to go and start asking some questions, or go and start questioning their belief system, or go and start to unwind some of those memories that's holding you back, because that's all it is. We're talking about memories. We're either talking about memories, or we're talking about stressing ourselves out because something we want to happen hasn't happened yet. What I'm saying is it's about this balance. It's about this state that we can be in that just allows everything to happen. There is no assertion here. It's all creation, because you are a creator. I hope that helps. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Camden Fells, and I look forward to our next talk on our next video. Take care.